The Zorathi Empire, a civilization that had long considered itself the pinnacle of intelligence and order in the galaxy, had always prided itself on its psychic abilities. Their collective mind was what set them apart, what made them rulers over worlds. Their queen, Zara, carried the weight of her entire empire's traditions and expectations. She was no mere figurehead. Her role was to maintain the psychic unity that kept their society intact. Her path was clear from birth. She would marry a Zorathi of high standing to solidify the bonds of their collective mind, ensuring the empire's dominance would never falter. But now Zara found herself on Earth, a world so primitive that most of her people scoffed at the very idea of acknowledging it. Still, Earth had become a place of interest, not for its technology, but for its position in the galaxy. It was a hub of activity, a crossroads where different species came and went. The Zorathi saw it as an opportunity for control, and Zara, bound by duty, was sent to negotiate a treaty with its people. Her first impression of Earth was as expected, primitive. The cities, while teeming with life, lacked the elegance and efficiency of Zorathi design. The humans themselves were chaotic, emotional creatures. And yet there was something she couldn't quite dismiss. Amid the clutter, there was a resilience, a strength born from struggle. This was not a race of conquerors, yet they had survived and even thrived in the galaxy's harshest corners. It intrigued her in ways she didn't expect. Then she met Captain James Carter. He stood before her, representing humanity, a single man meant to convey the values of an entire species. At first, she saw him as little more than a tool, another piece in the political puzzle. But as they spoke, something shifted. He was calm but resolute, carrying an air of authority that came not from his rank, but from something deeper. His words were measured, but it was his eyes that unsettled her. There was a fire in them, a passion she had never seen in her own kind. The Zorathi were logical, dispassionate, but this human? He brimmed with an intensity she didn't understand. Zara couldn't help but be curious. What drove him? What gave him such a strong sense of justice, of right and wrong? She tested him with questions, probing the limits of his resolve. Each time, he answered with a calm certainty that only deepened her curiosity. She had met ambassadors and diplomats from a dozen worlds, but none like him. There was something raw about humanity, something untamed. It fascinated her. But that fascination soon gave way to an uncomfortable realization. Her duty was clear. She was to form an alliance, secure the treaty, and return to her people. Yet with every moment spent in conversation with James, she found herself questioning the very values she had been raised to uphold. Why did her people look down on humanity? What made them so certain of their superiority? These humans, with all their flaws, had a strength the Zorathi had never recognized. And it was a strength that wasn't born from psychic power or technological superiority. It was born from their spirit. Zara's thoughts grew heavy with conflict. Her duty demanded she marry within her species, to uphold the ancient traditions that had kept the Zorathi strong. But for the first time in her life, she felt a pull in a different direction. James represented something different, something unpredictable. And in his presence, she began to feel the weight of the expectations placed upon her. Their conversations, though formal, crackled with unspoken tension. Zara found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. It wasn't just his sense of justice, or his deep emotional capacity. It was the way he challenged everything she thought she knew. He stood as a mirror, reflecting the doubts she had long buried within herself. She had been raised to believe in the Zorathi's superiority, but James, without even trying, made her question it all. As the days passed, Zara's internal struggle deepened. She was not supposed to feel this way. She was a queen, destined to lead her people through the strength of their collective mind. And yet, here she was, considering the thoughts of a human, a species her people deemed inferior. The idea of choosing a human over her own kind was unthinkable, yet it lingered in her mind, gnawing at the edges of her certainty. Zara knew the consequences of her feelings. If she defied tradition, if she allowed herself to care for James, it would not only affect her but her entire empire. The Zorathi would see it as a betrayal, a weakening of the psychic bond that held them together. But was it weakness to see value in something different? Was it weakness to question the very foundations of her people's beliefs? The conflict within her grew, and with it, a seed of rebellion began to sprout. Zara found herself standing at a crossroads. She could return to the Zorathi, fulfill her duty, and marry as expected, ensuring the continuity of their empire. Or she could choose a different path, a path that would stun her people and potentially change the course of the galaxy forever. For the first time in her life, Zara felt truly uncertain. As days passed, Zara's time on Earth became more than just a diplomatic mission. She found herself immersed in a world unlike her own, a place where emotions ran deep, and individuality was celebrated. Under James' guidance, she saw facets of humanity that she had never imagined. Their capacity for compassion, the way they loved without restraint, and the freedom they valued above all else, it was all so foreign to her. The Zorathi prized unity above all, their collective mind was their greatest strength, and individuality was seen as a flaw. But here, it was a virtue. James would often speak of the importance of making one's own choices, of charting a path guided not by duty but by desire and conviction. Zara listened, intrigued, as he spoke of lives filled with struggle and triumph, love and loss. There was something in the way he described these experiences that stirred something deep within her. It was during one of these conversations that she felt it for the first time, a subtle connection, like a thread binding her to James. At first, she dismissed it as a momentary lapse in her control, a fleeting psychic impression. But as their interactions continued, the bond only grew stronger. She began to sense his emotions even when he wasn't speaking, his frustration, his joy, his determination. It was as if their minds were aligning in ways that were both natural and alarming. For a Zorathi, this type of bond was sacred, reserved for those within their species. But here she was, forming one with a human, an experience that should have been impossible. It unsettled her, this growing connection. It was more than just curiosity now, it was something much deeper. She could feel the weight of James' emotions, his passion for justice, his hope for a future where humanity stood as equals in the galaxy. And with every new emotion she experienced through him, Zara found herself pulled further from the traditions that had once anchored her. Yet the tension within her grew. She was still a queen, bound by her duty to her people, and her future had always been set. She was to marry a Zorathi mate, ensuring the strength of the psychic collective. But now, she questioned that destiny. Could she truly ignore what was blossoming between her and James? Each day, the choice seemed harder to make. Her duty was clear, but her heart was no longer aligned with it. For the first time in her life, she saw the Zorathi way as a prison, one that stifled true emotion and freedom. And then, there was that moment, a single, unguarded instant that changed everything. It was quiet, just the two of them, lost in conversation about the future, the stars, and what lay beyond. Zara let her guard down for the briefest of moments, allowing the psychic bond to fully connect. In that moment, she felt everything, James' deepest fears, his hopes, the weight of his own responsibilities. And in return, she allowed him to glimpse her own emotions, her doubts, her long-buried desire for something more than duty. It was a moment of pure vulnerability, and it left her shaken. This bond, now so strong, was something she couldn't deny or sever, even if she wanted to. It wasn't just an emotional connection, it was a merging of minds, something that could change not only her future but the future of her people. She knew that what she shared with James was more than just an alliance, or a fleeting attraction. It was something that transcended tradition and species, something that defied the very laws her people had followed for millennia. The consequences of this connection began to weigh heavily on her. What would her people say? How could she explain choosing a human over one of her own kind? More than that, what did this bond mean for the Zorathi? If she allowed it to grow, would it weaken the collective, or could it be something entirely new, something stronger? Zara stood at the edge of a precipice. One path led back to the life she had always known, a life of duty and tradition, where her choices were dictated by the needs of her people. The other path was uncertain, filled with risks and unknowns, but also the possibility of something greater. James had opened her eyes to the beauty of freedom, of making choices based on one's own desires, not out of obligation. And now, with this bond between them, the stakes had never been higher. As the connection between them deepened, Zara could no longer ignore the truth. Her heart was leading her in a direction she had never anticipated, one that could change everything. Word of Zara's growing attachment to a human had not gone unnoticed. Back in the Zorathi Empire, whispers began to circulate among the ruling council. The idea that their queen, the embodiment of their tradition and strength, could be entangled with a species so far beneath them was unthinkable. Zara was meant to be a beacon of unity, someone who upheld the psychic bond that held their society together. The fact that her connection to a human was not only emotional but seemingly psychic alarmed the leaders. It threatened everything they stood for. Their response was swift. They devised a plan to bring Zara back into the fold, to sever whatever bond had formed between her and James. Using their most powerful psychic technology, they planned to erase her memories of him entirely. It was a cruel solution, but in their minds, a necessary one. To allow this relationship to continue would undermine the very fabric of their society. They needed their queen back, untainted and loyal to her people, not some human diplomat. Zara, unaware of the full extent of the council's plan, was summoned back to the Empire under the guise of a routine check on her psychic strength. She had sensed the council's unease, felt their quiet disapproval, but she hadn't expected them to act so quickly or with such drastic measures. When the device was activated, the goal was clear: erase her connection to James, wipe away the emotions that had grown between them, and reset her loyalty to her people. But the council had underestimated the strength of the bond between Zara and James. As the device began its work, something extraordinary happened. Instead of her mind succumbing to the council's will, Zara's connection to James surged, defying the psychic manipulation. She fought back, not just for herself, but for everything she had come to feel and understand through James. And in that moment she unlocked something within herself, a power that had been dormant, buried under layers of tradition and duty. It wasn't just Zara's strength that was awakened, though. The bond with James had done more than connect them emotionally. It had sparked something within him, too. As Zara's power grew, James, light years away on Earth, began to feel its effects. His mind opened in ways he had never experienced, and suddenly, he was aware of things he couldn't explain: thoughts, emotions, a heightened sense of perception. It was as if the bond between them had created a feedback loop, amplifying both their abilities to a level that rivaled even the collective Zorathi mind. Faced with this newfound power, Zara made a decision. She could no longer follow the path laid out for her by her people. The traditions, the duty, the expectations, they all seemed hollow in the face of what she had discovered. Her connection to James wasn't just a rebellion of the heart. It was a rebellion of the mind, a rejection of the limitations imposed on her by her own kind. Zara refused to submit to the council's will. She destroyed the device meant to erase her memories and stood before the council as something they had never anticipated: a queen who had embraced her own individuality, who had found power in something beyond their rigid structure. And with her rejection of their control, the seeds of rebellion were sown. Word of Zara's defiance spread quickly through the empire. Many Zorathi, long dissatisfied with the council's rigid hierarchy, saw in Zara the leader they had been waiting for. She represented a break from the past, a future where individuality wasn't a flaw but a strength. Slowly, others began to rally behind her, seeing in her rebellion a chance to break free from the constraints that had bound their people for so long. James, too, was not untouched by the changes. As the bond between him and Zara deepened, his own awareness grew. He could sense things before they happened, understand motives and intentions without words being spoken. It was as if Zara's psychic abilities had unlocked something within him that had lain dormant. Together, they realized that their bond was more than just a personal connection. It was a force that could reshape the galaxy. With the rebellion growing and their powers intertwined, Zara and James began to plan. They knew the council would not sit idly by. The Zorathi leadership would seek to crush the rebellion before it could gain too much momentum. But Zara and James had something the Council didn't, an unbreakable bond that combined the strength of two very different worlds. Their rebellion was no longer just about them. It was about the future of the Zorathi people, and perhaps even the future of the galaxy itself. The rebellion swept through the Zorathi Empire like wildfire. What had started as whispers of discontent had grown into full-blown defiance, with more citizens openly questioning the authority of the ruling council. Zara, now a symbol of hope and change, stood at the center of this movement. She embodied everything the Zorathi leadership feared, a challenge to their tradition, a disruption of their carefully maintained order. They could feel their control slipping as more and more of their people began to rally behind her. The leadership, desperate to regain power, turned to the only weapon they knew, their psychic might. They unleashed the full force of their collective power, trying to suppress the uprising by overwhelming the minds of the rebels. For centuries, this method had always worked. No one could resist the strength of the Zorathi collective. But this time was different. Zara's bond with James had created something new, something the Council couldn't control or predict. Her psychic connection, combined with the fire of humanity's resilience, was too strong to be subdued. The rebellion found an unexpected ally in humanity. James had returned to Earth, and with Zara's guidance, began to forge an alliance between the humans and the rebel Zorathi. It was an alliance that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. Humans, with their primitive technology and unpredictable emotions, and the Zorathi, a race that had always seen itself as superior. But now, in the face of a common enemy, they came together. The adaptability of humans combined with the psychic power of the Zorathi rebels created a force the galaxy had never seen before. The galaxy watched in awe as this unlikely alliance took shape. The old order, the hierarchy that had kept the Zorathi in power for so long, was beginning to crumble. And at the heart of it all was the bond between Zara and James, a bond that defied the very laws of nature, but one that had become the key to their shared strength. As Zara and James continued to rally their forces, a shocking truth was uncovered. In their quest to understand the nature of the bond they shared, Zara stumbled upon a long-buried secret within the Zorathi archives. The Zorathi had been manipulating human evolution for centuries. It wasn't by chance that humans had developed their unique resilience, their adaptability, and their emotional depth. The Zorathi had seen potential in humanity long ago and had subtly guided their development, intending to harvest them as psychic soldiers. The revelation was staggering. Humans had never been as primitive as the Zorathi believed. They were always meant to be a part of the Zorathi's long-term plan, tools to be used in their endless quest for power. But the bond between Zara and James had turned that plan on its head. Instead of being pawns in the Zorathi's scheme, humans were now partners in the fight for freedom. This revelation fueled the rebellion even further. Zara and James now knew that their bond was not just a personal connection, it was a weapon against the very empire that had sought to control them. The Zorathi leadership had set the stage for their own downfall, and now Zara and James were ready to deliver the final blow. With the truth exposed, Zara and James began preparing for the ultimate confrontation. They knew the ruling elite would not go down without a fight. The capital of the Zorathi Empire was fortified, its defenses bolstered by the full strength of the collective mind. It would be the final battleground, the place where the fate of the Empire, and the galaxy, would be decided. As they rallied their forces, Zara and James felt their bond grow even stronger. What had started as a connection of minds had become something much deeper. They moved in sync, their thoughts aligned, their emotions intertwined. It was as if they were no longer two separate beings but one powerful force, capable of facing whatever the Empire threw at them. The stage was set for the final assault. Zara and James stood at the head of their united army, a mix of human soldiers and Zorathi rebels, each side bringing its own unique strengths to the fight. They knew the battle ahead would be brutal, but they also knew they had something the ruling council didn't: hope, and the unwavering belief that freedom was worth fighting for. The galaxy watched as the forces prepared to collide, knowing that whatever happened next would shape the course of history forever. the final battle erupted with a fury that echoed across the galaxy. Zara and James stood at the forefront, their forces rallying behind them, an alliance that had once seemed impossible. The Zorathi elite, fortified within their capital, unleashed the full force of their psychic power, attempting to crush the rebellion with the weight of centuries-old dominance. But Zara, empowered by her bond with James, was not the same queen they had once known. The connection between them, once seen as an anomaly, had now become their greatest weapon. Together they moved as one, their minds synchronized in a way that defied explanation. Zara wielded her psychic abilities with a precision and strength that the Zorathi had never anticipated, while James brought the unpredictable ingenuity of humanity to the battlefield. His tactical mind, combined with her psychic prowess, allowed them to outmaneuver the Empire's forces at every turn. The Empire's psychic collective, once considered invincible, began to falter. Zara had always been a part of that collective, but now, standing outside of it, she could see its weaknesses. The rigidity that had kept her people strong was now its downfall. The Zorathi elite had become too reliant on control, too complacent in their belief that no force could challenge them. But Zara and James were a new kind of force, one born from love, rebellion, and an unbreakable connection. As the battle raged on, a shocking realization unfolded. In the heat of combat, James began to experience something new, something that even Zara hadn't foreseen. The psychic bond between them had done more than just strengthen their connection, it had awakened something in him. The ancient manipulations of humanity by the Zorathi, once a carefully guarded secret, had inadvertently unlocked psychic potential within James. It was a power that the Zorathi elite had never fully understood, a potential they had sought to control but had never anticipated would manifest in this way. James became a conduit for this power, his mind and body acting as a bridge between the human Zorathi alliance. As the battle intensified, he began to channel abilities that far surpassed anything the Zorathi elite had prepared for. The untapped potential of humanity, once seen as a weakness, now surged to the forefront, turning the tide of the battle. The Zorathi leadership, blindsided by this revelation, could do little to stop the growing wave of resistance. The Empire's forces crumbled under the weight of this new reality. Zara, her power fully realized, led the charge, while James, now fully aware of his own strength, guided the human forces with unparalleled insight. Together, they shattered the grip of the Zorathi elite, breaking through their defenses and bringing the rebellion to a decisive victory. The old order, once so assured of its dominance, lay in ruins. With the Zorathi leadership defeated, the aftermath brought a profound sense of change. Zara, now more than just the queen of the Zorathi, stood as a bridge between two worlds. She had chosen humanity, not just in her bond with James but in her vision for the future. The galaxy had witnessed a revolution, one that had not only toppled an empire but had also shown that unity between species was not just possible, it was the key to survival. In the wake of the battle, Zara assumed a new role. No longer bound by the constraints of the Zorathi collective, she became a symbol of peace and unity. She advocated for cooperation between humans and Zorathi, for a galaxy where species work together rather than against each other. Her leadership was built on the very foundation that had once been seen as a threat, the bond between her and James. James, too, had found his place. No longer just a diplomat, he had become a pivotal figure in this new order, his psychic potential a testament to humanity's role in the galaxy's future. Together, Zara and James represented something greater than the sum of their parts. A partnership that had not only changed the course of history but had also shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. As the dust of battle settled, the galaxy entered a new era. The political landscape, once dominated by the Zorathi, was reshaped by cooperation and mutual respect. Species that had once been divided by fear and prejudice began to work together, inspired by the example set by Zara and James. The rebellion had not just been about toppling an empire, it had been about building a better future, one where diversity was celebrated and differences became the foundation of strength. In the end, the story of Zara and James became a legend, a tale told across the stars of a queen who defied her people, a human who unlocked his hidden potential, and a bond that united worlds. Their love, their rebellion, and their unwavering belief in the power of unity had changed the galaxy forever. It was a testament to what could be achieved when two very different species came together, not in conquest, but in understanding. Their story was not just one of victory, but of hope. Hope for a future where the galaxy could thrive in harmony, where the mistakes of the past would not define the possibilities of tomorrow. Zara and James, bound by love and shared purpose, had shown the galaxy that peace was not only possible, it was inevitable.